Saquon Barkley, for me, he is the favorite. Why are people so adamant that a running back can no longer, never in NFL history, can a running back win an MVP anymore? That's what it sounds like.
Is Saquon Barkley special? Yes. But I don't think he's Derrick Henry special.
They have every ingredient that you want. The only thing missing is, can Lamar Jackson in the AFC Championship, can he be efficient enough?
The way the Chargers played on Monday night was utterly pathetic. That was one of the worst performances I've seen from a team all season. I thought the Ravens strolled that game on Monday night because the Chargers really didn't show up in a really disappointing fashion.
If Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, if they win the Super Bowl this year, with everything they've gone through and all the changing pieces, this will be their greatest accomplishment.
Is there part of you that just watches Travis Kelce and goes, do you know what? I fully expect him to turn it on in 3 or 4 weeks.
The numbers are very concerning for Travis Kelce.
All right, Brian, we had 2 games at SoFi Stadium on Sunday and Monday this week where a resurgent Los Angeles team got absolutely hammered by a proper contender. So let's start with the Rams being beaten by the Eagles on Sunday. A sensational all-round performance from Philadelphia, but doing it on the back of Saquon Barkley. 255 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, breaking off 2 70-yard-plus touchdowns in the same game. We talked MVP last week and the running back never came into conversation. I feel increasingly like this guy is becoming more and more hyped for that award this year.
If this continues, Will, I don't see how Saquon Barkley is not the MVP of the league. I had a story this week about this at talkSPORT.com, looking at the history. Running backs used to win the MVP in the NFL. It actually wasn't that crazy of an idea. You had a kicker at one point, won MVP. And we're not talking about an anomaly or 1 or 2 running backs. Terrell Davis won it before. You can go down the list. In the 1990s, you would have running backs winning this award, and then it became a quarterback award. And I could go off and on and keep going off about how lazy voters have become to where they just want to tick the box. Who's the best quarterback this year? Who has the most touchdowns? That has to change. And this is a reminder of the value of running backs in the NFL. We saw Christian McCaffrey last year, who was a serious MVP candidate, finished number 3 overall. You have Josh Allen, you have Lamar Jackson, but I don't know how right now, if you look at this, that Saquon Barkley is not a favorite, or for me, he is the favorite. He has to keep this going. It's harder than ever, as we all know, to win this as a running back, but he deserves to be in this conversation right now. And I feel like we've been coming on this program for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and I've been mentioning the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, and we're not talking about Nick Sirianni drama anymore. This is a team that's really starting to roll. And right now, they look like last year's Eagles, when last year's Eagles were the best team in the NFL.
It's difficult because for me, the 9-2 Eagles, way better than last season's 10-1 Eagles. If you actually put the tape on in front of you, and Saquon Barkley is a huge reason why the offense is doing that. I think in the NFL, if we take the actual meaning for most valuable player, I cannot see why it's not, how it would ever not be a quarterback. It is the most important position in all of
the
sports.
Problem. That's the problem with it, though. It used to
it's
not always
a best player award.
But it used to not always be the
valuable player.
But how did the definition change? This is a fun conversation for me. How did the definition change in the last 12 years? Because linebackers have won. Defensive, Lawrence Taylor. Was Lawrence Taylor in 1986? Ask Bill Belichick and his football better than anybody in the world. Lawrence Taylor was the best player in the world in 1986. He won MVP. You've had running backs win it before. How come they can't win it anymore? How come the best player can't be a running back anymore, can't be an edge rusher?
From my perspective, and I think there's a lot to be said about the devaluing of the position in general, that running back is just not treated as the superstar anymore. You do not build your entire offense around a feature back unless it's Derrick Henry, unless it is, and in this case now, Saquon Barkley. But for me, Saquon Barkley was this good in New York with a bad offensive line, with Daniel Jones there. But I think he was this good. If you watch those 2 big runs that they break off, Britton Covey for the second one breaks an incredible block at the second level. After the best offensive line in football breaks open a huge hole for him. I think he always was this good. He's just now on a very, very good team. But we're not going to give most valuable player to Cam Jurgens, are we? We're going to be giving it to the guy who's going and scoring the touchdown.
He's averaging 6.2 yards per carry. That would be the second highest yards per carry average that Jim Brown ever had. Jim Brown, one of the best players in NFL history, and Jim Brown won the MVP 3 times. Yeah, quarterbacks weren't throwing for 40 touchdowns back then, but you can't tell me that if we're going to sit here and debate most valuable player, for me that's always meant you are the best player, but it also is you are the most valuable in terms of you take this person away from this team is not the same. Saquon Barkley has completely changed the Eagles' offense. He's putting up numbers we have not seen in a long, long time. The vote's not done, because I said on here about a month ago and said we cannot give it to Lamar Jackson yet. You can't crown him yet. And Baltimore's been off and on the entire time. But I don't know how he's not in the conversation. And if he's in the conversation, he should be allowed to win the MVP. Why are people so adamant that a running back can no longer, never in NFL history, can a running back win an MVP anymore? That's what it sounds like to me.
I think part of the issue is the devaluing of the position in general, though. Right?
I agree with you.
So Adrian Peterson, in 2011, the last running back to win an MVP, when he won that MVP, he got given a 6-year, $85 million contract. So $14.5 million per year. At that point, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL was earning just north of $20 million a year. Saquon Barkley gets the richest free agent contract for a running back this offseason. It's only $12.5 million a year. It's less than Adrian Peterson was getting paid 14 years ago. Oh, and by the way, quarterbacks are now being paid 3 times what they were being paid.
And that's all relevant, but that doesn't have anything to do with the actual MVP of the league. Voters aren't sitting around and looking at who's making the most money. I know what you're saying.
What it is about is it's about the league recognizing that running backs, the wear and tear, their shorter careers and all
100%.
that stuff is key. But actually, if you've got a good scheme, a good offensive line, a great design, there are very few running backs who are that special. Most of them are plug and play. Most of them, if you can find a really good one-cut guy who's athletic enough and can hit the hole, then you can throw him into the scheme. And the 49ers, before Christian McCaffrey, did it for 4 or 5 years and just rotated through these absolute no-name guys after Frank Gore left. Is Saquon Barkley special? Yes. But I don't think he's Derrick Henry special. I don't think he is a guy who
he's better than Derrick Henry right now. He's better than Derrick Henry right now.
But Derrick Henry's done it for a decade now. Saquon Barkley's having one good season.
But
Derrick Henry's going to the Hall of Fame.
The MVP is not.
Saquon Barkley's not going to the Hall of Fame right now.
That's not the point. We're talking about the
MVP.
We're talking about the most valuable player of the NFL in 2024. That is the only conversation. It has nothing to do with how much money you make, how your offense is run, who's been better for the last 10 years. The award, and I like to stick to facts. The award is the most valuable player in 2024. So that's part of the problem, is saying like, oh, well, Derrick Henry is better because he's had a better career and he's going in the Hall of Fame. That's not what we're actually talking about. Who is the MVP of the NFL right now? And I would have Josh Allen number 1, Saquon Barkley number 2, and Lamar Jackson number 3. And that's the end of the conversation for me.
Let's see what his teammates have to say about him, because I did catch up with tight end Dallas Goedert ahead of this game this weekend. You can see the whole video on talkSPORT's End Zone YouTube channel. Go there, like, subscribe, get in the comments as well. But yeah, I mean, he's clearly had an amazing season. The backwards hurdle was a moment.
He's in Madden now. It's now in
Madden. And actually, that's what I asked Dallas Goedert about.
He's iconic for sure. That play, sparked around the world. To get a play that you did, that only you've done on Madden, is pretty special. I heard somebody was using it the other day, and they fumbled when they backwards hurdled, so they were upset about that. But to get a play like that in Madden is special. But that's just the kind of player Saquon is. He's been a huge addition for our offense, and he's an even better guy, which makes it fun to be around him in the locker room, because he just wants the best for the team, and individual success comes second to that. He's a specimen. He was God gifted him with a lot of abilities, but he definitely puts him to work. He's in there early. He's doing treatment. He's been getting a lot of carries for us. So he makes sure his body's right for Sunday. At practice, you see him just bursting through the line just like he does in a game, and it's like, oh my gosh, this dude is special. But it's no surprise what he did and what he's able to be doing in this league ever since he came to this team. And you see him in the weight room lifting heavy weight like it's nothing. And, he's just an incredible person. So he did say something to me the other day that there's never been a Super Bowl winning team with an MVP at running back. So he's okay not winning if it can get us a Super Bowl.
There you have it. Saquon Barkley doesn't want to win the MVP, according to Dallas Goedert, as long as he wins a ring.
He just needs to win the Super Bowl. That's
exactly. But honestly, though, I wish more players had that attitude. I wish that Devontae Adams would stop signing for teams because a guy he threw with in college now plays there. Like, he'd go and try and win a championship. Because if you win a championship or multiple championships, your career extends way beyond when you stop playing.
It usually takes care of itself. So many guys
exactly.
forget that. The money usually works out if you just keep winning Super Bowls.
Tom Brady being the prime example. Look, let's just to reflect on the running back position overall, because Saquon is sensational, and I'm talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here, because there were two huge free agent running backs available during this offseason. And I think DeAndre Swift is in that conversation as well, because he was very, very good at the Lions and has had an impact with the Bears. But really, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. The Cowboys claim they couldn't find the money to sign Derrick Henry. At 31 years old, he was a bit rich for their blood. He ends up going and having a sensational season at Baltimore and is one of the reasons that team is very much in playoff contention. Saquon Barkley is having an MVP-level season, whilst on the other side of it, the New York Giants decided they couldn't possibly afford to pay Saquon Barkley. They lowballed him massively, which is why he looked to leave in free agency. And they've now spent the money they saved on him on Devin Singletary, who is no longer their starting running back, and on Drew Lock, who's not even their backup quarterback. They're starting Tommy DeVito instead of him.
Classic New York Giants.
It's just as much as I understand and I kind of appreciate why teams aren't paying running backs, when you've got a really good one in your building, finding that extra couple of million to keep him there is surely the right idea.
The Philadelphia Eagles are 9-2 and rival the Detroit Lions as the hottest team in the NFL as we speak, because they got it right this offseason with Saquon Barkley. I remember when that move happened, we had this all covered at talkSPORT.com, but that sent shockwaves. I was like, oh my gosh, you have Jalen Hurts, you have A.J. Brown, you have a good defense, you have good offensive line, Kelce had retired, and you're going to have one of the best running backs. Now, the problem with Barkley has always been health, right? I mean, could he stay healthy? Could he keep this going over 17 games, do this in the playoffs and on? We're still going to find out. He can't have a hamstring issue. He can't not be at 100% in the NFC Championship. But the Eagles got that right. And, Will, you nailed that. You look at teams like the Dallas Cowboys, like the New York Giants. Why are they struggling so much? Why are they not 9-2? Because the front office, the ownership, Jerry Jones, they make the wrong decisions. And often, I hate to say this, because you can't let fans run teams, but you would often be better with a team like the Cowboys or the Giants letting a fan blog run that team, because they would have known, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, yeah, we should sign Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry would be perfect for this.
You or I could have told Jerry Jones
be perfect for this team. Yeah, the Eagles should go out and gives Jalen Hurts some support in the backfield and give him, because the thing is with Barkley, that takes the pressure off Jalen Hurts. We're not sitting here and talking about every single game Jalen Hurts, who had taken a lot of hits, who had some injury issues himself. This is a dynamic offense right now that is running through Saquon Barkley, and that makes Jalen Hurts getting the Super Bowl much easier for him.
Just to take the big picture with the Philadelphia Eagles, from my perspective, losing Brandon Graham after Sunday was a real shocker. He was their best pass rusher, but there's a huge amount of depth on that defensive line. They've done brilliantly in the draft to bring in two rookie defensive backs, Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, who have both been absolutely sensational. And then the Saquon Barkley-ness of it, added to A.J. Brown, the Slim Reaper Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, the best offensive line in football, like our buddy Dallas Goedert, like all of that combined. Right now, if the NFC Championship game isn't Lions-Eagles, one of those teams are stuffed up because they are a class above everyone else. And last year, I was screaming from the rooftops to anyone that would listen to me that the 10-1 Eagles were absolute frauds, that they were going to fall apart, that there's no way they'd do anything in the playoffs. I feel like how I feel about this year's Kansas City Chiefs.
I was just going to say, are you talking about the Chiefs right now?
Yeah,
That's what that sounds
quite.
like.
Because them and I think there's a very, very close comparison between those two. The Eagles, through coaching, through clever pickups, have taken what was a team who were very lucky to be at that record last year to a team who I think are top 3 in the NFL right now. And people in Philly should be dreaming of being in New Orleans in February at this point.
The ironic part is the second they lose one game, half of Philly will want to fire Nick Sirianni. That's how it goes in Philly.
Dallas got it in that interview, by the way. I asked about the pressure on Sirianni. He kind of went, yeah, Philly fans. And you're like, even the players know. They're just like, yeah, come on. They
lose one game. They lose a game they don't have to win. And they'll be like, Sirianni's gone. He's horrible. Get rid of him. Bring in Bill Belichick.
Right, so the Philadelphia Eagles, we're saying, are absolutely contenders in the NFC. Them and the Lions at the very top of the division. We know that in the AFC, we have the Chiefs 10-1. We've got this brilliant Bills team who beat the Chiefs last weekend on a bye now. They're going to thrash the 49ers next weekend and go back on a roll. There is another team in the AFC that people are really looking at as a possible contender, who are sneaking up from the back, who aren't leading their division right now, who had a tough loss to the Steelers a couple of weeks ago. But the Ravens go into Los Angeles. They beat the Chargers on Monday night. They look very, very impressive doing it. And suddenly I'm hearing a lot of buzz around that offense being the best in the league and then being a possible Super Bowl team.
I feel like we've been doing this all season with the Baltimore Ravens, right?
Yeah, right.
Like 1 week they let you down. What's going on with the Ravens? Is Lamar Jackson going to fail again in the playoffs? And next week, Lamar Jackson's the MVP. Oh my gosh, Derrick Henry is the king rusher of the NFL. John Harbaugh is the most underrated coach in the NFL. All those things. My issue with the Ravens all season has been their lack of consistency. Personally, I don't think going to Los Angeles and winning is that big of a deal because you could be a college team and win an NFL stadium in Los Angeles because they don't have fans there. They don't have, you don't, they're,
But you know what? The Chargers on Monday, that's the loudest I've heard an LA home crowd.
It's all relative, right?
Like, it is relative, but it feels like weirdly, despite the fact that the Rams won a Super Bowl in that city, feels like they're starting to really lean Chargers.
I will always think
there was a good number of
San
Chargers
Diego
fans
coming up for a long weekend. I don't think there were any real Chargers fans or Rams fan. I have been to LA after they won a Super Bowl. You can be there a week later and you don't see any Rams gear anywhere in LA. That's for another topic. So I don't think winning in LA is that big of a deal. But that is a good Chargers team. It's coached by one of the Harbaugh brothers. And I completely agree with you. We saw Baltimore remind everybody that, oh yeah, we're supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. We have Lamar Jackson, the two-time MVP. We have Derrick Henry, who's absolutely unstoppable. What I've always loved about this team and why I've been waiting all season for this team to take that next step because they're an all-weather team. They can win in September. They can win November. They can win in February. They can win in the Superdome. They're good enough to do that. They have past experience. They've had playoff failure. They've also won a Super Bowl. Like that, they have every ingredient that you want. The only thing missing is, can Lamar Jackson in the AFC Championship, can he be efficient enough? Can he not try to do too much? I remember we spoke at talkSPORT.com with a Baltimore columnist, Kyle Goon, and he was saying, one of the issues for Lamar Jackson is, does he try to do too much in the playoffs? Does at some point, and we saw that the last couple of years, does he put it on himself and I'm going to win this? Well, that's not really what Patrick Mahomes does. Patrick Mahomes makes the incredible moves, the incredible throw, and he sets up Travis Kelce, DeAndre Hopkins. But in the end, this is a Baltimore team, Will, that should be there. I just don't know. Their lack of consistency this season has troubled me since week one.
My feeling on this sudden hot topic of the Ravens being amazing, it's an isolation game on Monday, right? Whenever it's standalone and a team performs really well, we are destined to hype them up. Now, we sat in these seats last week and we talked about the brilliant job Jim Harbaugh had done, about taking a defense which lacked big names, the big names were injured, and had really, really trained them up to a high level, was getting Justin Herbert looking like a superstar, and really, really, like, they could be the dark horse team. The problem is that the way the Chargers played on Monday night was utterly pathetic. That was one of the worst performances I've seen from a team all season. Between the fact that on offense, they're throwing the ball all over the place, and yet Quentin Johnston, a first-round pick, has 5 targets, 3 drops, no catches. The second receiver on that team has 8 targets, 3 catches for 38 yards. Nothing there to help Justin Herbert out. And suddenly, everyone's going, oh, the Ravens' pass defense has figured it out. No, if people don't catch balls, then you're not going to give up air yards. They didn't run the ball well. They weren't throwing the ball well. And then on defense, they were just leaving these holes all over the place for the Ravens. I thought the Ravens strolled that game on Monday night because the Chargers really didn't show up in a really disappointing fashion. Turns out that John absolutely has a number done on Jim.
3-0 versus his brother.
3-0 against his brother.
With a Super Bowl ring.
And then I had a little look into it. What do you think the record? The Chargers are 7-5. They are still in playoff contention, right? Do you know what the record of the 7 teams that they've beaten this season are?
I imagine it's not very good.
26-52.
Yeah, I don't believe in the Chargers. The Chargers are not doing anything real this year. I haven't believed in the Chargers all season. Jim Harbaugh's done a nice job. Jim Harbaugh has proved thus far that he can still coach in the NFL.
It means it shows that coaching matters, right?
It does, but
talent eventually shows that.
Yeah, and it's not like they're 9-2. They're not 10-1. They're not smoking everybody. They beat a bunch of bad teams. They don't have enough weapons on offense. I completely agree with you. You look at the receivers, it still feels like Justin Herbert is being underserved by the Los Angeles Chargers. You have a young quarterback who's on a rookie deal, who has one of the best arms in the last 20 years. And what does he really have around him? There's no part of me that believes that the Los Angeles Chargers are a true contender. They're the 12th best, 10th best team in the league, and that doesn't get you very far in the NFL.
And this for me is why I wanted to give you the example of how bad I thought the Chargers were on Monday, how disappointing they were, because it highlighted for me that the Ravens didn't fix any of their problems on Monday. The pass defense didn't suddenly get brilliant. The defensive backs didn't suddenly start absolutely lighting the world on fire. There were still huge holes in the zones. They still found the guys. The guys just dropped the ball when it was thrown to them. I still think the coaching on both sides of the ball is an issue. Zach Orr still hasn't figured out what that defense needs to look like for the Ravens, and there's a lack of talent up front compared with what they've had previously. Roquan Smith goes out of the game, and the very, very first drive, the Chargers pick them apart down the field, like tear them a new one. And I was terrified they were going to get thrashed until the Chargers fell off a cliff. And then on the offensive side of the ball, it's all Lamar Jackson, it's all Derrick Henry. But once you go up against a team who know how to stop that,
and that's what we saw. And that's what we saw. What I still think about the Ravens is that loss to the Steelers. That loss to the Steelers was concerning to me because it's not about being 8-3 or 9-2. If you're the Baltimore Ravens, the story the entire season was, can they take the next step? Can they be better than Chiefs? Can they reach the Super Bowl? Can Lamar Jackson truly deliver? Anyone in the NFL would take one Super Bowl ring over 3 MVPs. That's a really, really simple equation. There's no math to work out. One Super Bowl ring is worth 50, 100 MVPs, and they still have to prove it to me because every time I want to think that the Ravens have found it this year. The Ravens, they have consistency. This is the team that's going to take the next step. They lose to Pittsburgh. They lose to Russell Wilson. They don't look good when they play the Steelers. And they're still in second place in their division. There's no guarantee they're winning their division.
I look at the teams in the playoff picture right now. Pittsburgh, Kansas City when they're on their day, Buffalo, particularly if they're healthy on defense, Matt Milano coming back, the Broncos even.
Yeah.
And I look at all of those teams and I think they can all stop the run. They can all stop Derrick Henry. Like, Lamar Jackson's going to have to do something very special.
And usually when Lamar has to take that next step, he ends up throwing a couple picks. That's what's happened in the past. I hope it changes for him. I'm tired of having to talk about, can Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl? Yes, he is talented enough to win a Super Bowl. Is he going to do it with Baltimore? We're going to find out this year.
If the consensus goes the way it's going to go, and we've sat here and said Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen and fought our corners for them, but the consensus right now is Lamar Jackson for MVP.
Lamar Jackson will probably win the MVP.
So he's probably going to win the MVP. He may well make the AFC Championship game again. But a Ravens team who all of their years under John Harbaugh have been built on this stout defense, stopping the run, getting after the quarterback, just mauling teams up front, being brilliant in the trenches, don't have any of that anymore. And suddenly you're like, yeah, Lamar Jackson's great, but we're going to never win the big one. 3 MVPs is great, but you're wasting the talent of a 3 MVP guy. You start to look like Dan Marino on the Dolphins. You start to look like these teams who have unreal talent at the most important position and yet never get over the hump because it's the ultimate team sport. And I'm sorry, you can win 3 MVPs, but if you can't win in January, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I covered Lamar Jackson in college when he was at Louisville. I covered a game where I actually watched the University of Houston and their defensive coordinator at the time just destroy him. I mean, they had a brilliant game plan. He wins the Heisman. One of the dumbest things anyone said in the last 20 years in the NFL is that Lamar Jackson should have been a wide receiver. Lamar Jackson is a fantastic quarterback. He's one of the most talented, and I want to get this on the record because I occasionally deal with stuff on social media. People who think I hate Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history, one of the greatest dual threats in NFL history. The only person I would actually think comparable to him would be Randall Cunningham, who was so far ahead of his time. And I would love to watch Randall Cunningham play in 2024. Has some Michael Vick with a dual threat. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. But he's been a letdown in the playoffs, and he's made bad decisions, and there's no way around it. I said this earlier. It feels like he tries to do too much sometimes, and that's going to your point, Will. Okay, if the run gets stopped and they don't have tremendous wide receivers, and Lamar, you have to put it on his shoulders. Can he do that? But ultimately, that's Baltimore letting him down. You can't have somebody that talented who might win his 3rd MVP before he's reached his prime and not be in a Super Bowl. That team, that roster, the offensive talent around him has to be better. So that's on the front office, that's on the coaching staff.
I tell you right now, if you take Lamar Jackson and let's even ignore the very top tier. Let's ignore the Bills. Let's ignore the Chiefs. If you take Lamar Jackson, you put him on this current Steelers team, this current Broncos team.
It'd be a fun team.
This current Dolphins team. I would back the Dolphins with Lamar Jackson to go to the Super Bowl.
I would replace the head coach. I'm not sure that Mike McDaniel is a Super Bowl winning coach. But
I love the idea of Mike McDaniels and Lamar Jackson together. That's
right,
exciting
because that's like what NFL, I'm not saying you're an NFL nerd. That's what
I am an NFL nerd. That's fine. You can just say
on
that.
Social media, playing video games, fantasy football. Like, oh my God, give me Mike McDaniel with Lamar Jackson, and you're going to go 9-8 because that's how it goes. But I completely agree with you. Lamar Jackson, I can't make it any more clear. He's brilliant. He's one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history when it comes to pure talent. His team is not good enough, but it also starts at the top. If your quarterback, if your franchise quarterback is unpredictable at times, makes mental mistakes at times, tries to do too much at times, spends games running backwards and gets sacked for 20 yards or throws a couple picks, at some point, that's going to kill you in the playoffs. And recent history has shown that's always what happens. I hope he changes his story, but that's on him and that's on the Ravens.
Right, let's talk about the very top of the AFC then, because they're still there. The Kansas City Chiefs, 10-1, come very, very close to losing to Bryce Young and the Carolina
I thought you were going to say
Panthers.
came very close to losing, and I was going to be like, again and again and again and again. Every week, Will, the Chiefs are almost losing, and they're 10-1.
How impressed have you been with the way that Pat Mahomes has managed to make that group of weapons work? And look, we floated out there almost as a bit of a joke. Has he found a Travis Kelce replacement in Noah Gray? 2 touchdowns on Sunday, has been very good recently. But to me, it sings to the whole system, the whole coaching on the offense, that they're just, every week they find somebody. It's a Kareem Hunt game, it's a Juju Smith-Schuster game out of nowhere. And this week it was a Noah Gray game out of nowhere. Like, we have to give them some love for doing that, right?
I feel like I've been doing that all year. I've questioned how good they are. I said that the Chiefs did not deserve to be undefeated, and I think they ended up losing next week because they were not an undefeated, all-time classic, historic team. But no, they deserve 100% credit. If you're able to win with all these different pieces and change it up every week, and one week it's DeAndre Hopkins, then it's Kareem Hunt, then it's Noah Gray, then it's Travis Kelce, that means you have a really, really good quarterback, a really good head coach, a really good offensive coordinator. Obviously, Andy Reid is dialing it all up. That means your system works. That means you can game plan week to week. Some of the best coaches in the NFL, Bill Belichick was the king of this. They don't so much have a system and they are just running that system over and over, and you have to figure out a way to beat it. They're able to change it, adapt it. So every week they're making tweaks. They're running the game tape. They're looking at tendencies. They're scouting. They're doing everything that coaches do, working 15 hours a day. And they're finding, okay, how can we win this game with these pieces?
So could Noah Gray carry them to a Super Bowl?
They have enough pieces, and you have Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, so Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. He's been off this year. I thought last week he started to look a little bit like classic Patrick Mahomes. He also took some really bad sacks.
Did you see him in his press conference afterwards?
I did see him in his press conference afterwards.
Pat Mahomes comes up to the mic and says, I'd really like to win a game not on the last play of the game.
Because that's what they've done the entire season. And it's, at some point, your luck will run out. Or somebody else will make a play. I don't believe at all right now, as is, Kansas City is going to win the Super Bowl. And I fully believe this. If Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, if they win the Super Bowl this year, with everything they've gone through and all the changing pieces, this will be their greatest accomplishment. But as is, they're not good enough right now. They're not better than Detroit. They're not better than Philly. If Lamar Jackson plays the game of his life, they're not beating Baltimore. You could run down. They're not better than Buffalo. So they have to get home field advantage. It has to be at Arrowhead. And then you think with another month, 6 weeks, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, with these pieces, they start to fine-tune it. But when's it going to happen? It hasn't happened yet.
For me, the reason they need to be really concerned, and look, they need to be really concerned because they nearly lost to the Panthers. I really, really have to hammer this point home. The Carolina Panthers have been and are one of the worst teams in football. Now, the coaching has just got them playing well. Bryce Young had his best game in the NFL.
Bryce Young is starting to look like he actually has confidence again, which is nice to see.
And listen, I want to be positive. I think what the Panthers have done in recent weeks has been very good. the Chiefs should be steamrolling them. They should be doing what the Lions are doing to every team in the NFL and going, here's 50 points, we're only going to concede 10, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it and we're going to laugh our way back home. Like, they should have destroyed them. And instead, they're eking out a last-minute win. They're having to go on a late drive. They're relying on Patrick Mahomes to make this admittedly incredible play where he gets outside the pocket, gets up that left sideline, stays in bounds, beats everyone, and he just always seems to have that in his locker. But every other season with this Chiefs team in the Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator era, what's happened is they've come out okay. They've got really hot because Mahomes is incredible and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and all that stuff are going to be positive about. And then that Spags defense has got better and better and better as the year has gone on. And they get to January and they're like, right, we don't need to be scoring 35, 40 points on you anymore. Now we can beat you by only conceding 15 because our defense is incredible. This year, the script has flipped. This year, that first 7 or 8 games, we're sitting there going, do you know what? They might win the Super Bowl just based on this defense. And then the last few weeks, last 2 weeks, they've given over 325 plus yards through the air. They have given up, they've pressured absolutely nobody. The pass rush outside of Chris Jones, there's not a huge amount of talent there. So they've been able to scheme it up. George Karlaftis and doing all sorts of stunts. None of that existed. The Panthers' offensive line is barely worthy of college football, and yet the Chiefs couldn't get to Bryce Young, who is barely an NFL quarterback. And I watched that Chiefs defense and I just went, that's not a defense that should be a playoff defense, let alone a Super Bowl defense, considering they've got the greatest defensive coordinator in the league and all of the exciting pieces. And I think unless they figure that out in the next couple of weeks, I think much like last year's Eagles, you're going to see the Chiefs start to lose another game here and another game there. And the confidence starts to eat. And suddenly, they're not the number 1 seed and they're losing a wild card game and everyone's up in arms. And do you know what? I'd kind of really love it.
I've always said I don't root against Patrick Mahomes or Andy Reid. Andy Reid's one of the best coaches in NFL history. Patrick Mahomes, one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. The fact that they are 10-1 with all of their issues, I respect that. I also think you're wrong there. I think Bryce Young has actually reminded people that he is a capable NFL quarterback and looked pretty good. Bryce Young was the main reason they were in that game. I actually saw Patrick Mahomes running around, taking sacks, not being able to find openings in the coverage. But in the end, Will, for me, Kansas City is 10-1.
But what they were doing earlier in the season, like they play the Falcons earlier in the year, and that's a game where they didn't really put it together on offense, but they get into the fourth quarter and the defense just went, you know what? We're going to stand up here. We're going to make this happen. In this game, the Panthers were down 2 scores going into the fourth quarter and down a score driving late on. There's no way that team should be coming down and scoring a touchdown on you. And you expect it from these bang average middle tier teams. Last week when the Seahawks get the ball with 3 minutes remaining against the 49ers and needing 7 to win it, you're kind of feeling like Geno Smith's going to go and do it. I've never felt that about Bryce Young. As much as he's looked much, much better the last couple of weeks, and I'm really excited that the benching him and bringing him back might have actually worked. That Chiefs team should be doing what great teams have done for years and years and going 3 and out, turnover on downs because you're going to go for it on 4th down. We'll have the ball back. We'll take some knees and we'll go home with a win. And instead they're forced to take the ball back with less than a minute and go on this amazing field goal drive. Like, they're just relying on those 2 things way, way too often. And I think it's going to fall off a cliff. I really do.
I don't think it's falling off a cliff. I think Kansas City Kansas City could very well end up with the number 1 seed in the AFC. Do I think they're winning the Super Bowl this year as we speak right now? No, I do not. But I still believe that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, the 2 of them together, they have enough pieces, they have enough talent to figure this out. But it has to start. They can't. There's no flip to switch in the AFC Championship game. It has to start. And you are right. If you're struggling against Carolina and you struggled all season to finish off teams to get wins, that they're 10-1, they could be 6-5, they could be 5-6. There should be, without question, concern about the Chiefs. And you start to look at someone like Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, I remember we had a fun debate.
Is he going to do a January thing again? Because last year, people have to remember, Travis Kelce was rubbish in the regular season. And all those fantasy owners who went, yeah, I'll take a tight end in the first 2 rounds because it's Travis Kelce. He always scores 10-plus touchdowns, has 1,000 yards.
Not anymore.
He's ever reliable. But in January, he really turned it on. He was brilliant in the Super Bowl. He was brilliant in the AFC Championship game. Is there part of you that just watches Travis Kelce and goes, oh, he's a bit slow, he's trundling, he's not running the routes, but you know what? I fully expect him to turn it on in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
Well, but if you think that, then why won't the Chiefs turn it on? I mean, so if Travis Kelce is going to turn it on, so if you added a turned on Travis Kelce with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, you have DeAndre Hopkins, you have Kareem Hunt, you still have Chris Jones, you're sounding like somebody who thinks Kansas City is going to turn it on.
I'm asking you if you think he's going to turn it on. I personally think that. Well, but the problem is, I said this last year. I was looking at him going, "There's no way that guy's going to suddenly flip it," and he did suddenly flip it.
But he was better last year than he is this year,
Yeah,
and the numbers are very concerned. Like we're saying, concerning a lot with the Kansas City Chiefs, which we have not said much in the last few years. The numbers are very concerning for Travis Kelce. I mean, it's career low time is one of the biggest stats that you always watch for a wide receiver, and it can, if you're catching a 70-yard touchdown, it will skew it. But is yards per catch, average yards per catch. And you start looking at Travis Kelce's average yards per catch, and that's usually when you can tell that a very good wide receiver, a great wide receiver, a tight end is starting to trail down. His have trailed down remarkably, which means he's not getting separation as much anymore. He's not as fast anymore. He's not able to, get yards after the catch, all of those things. And that's continued to go down for him. At some point, you can't just turn it on anymore. You can't, in January, I'm going to play harder or be more intense because you're just not fast enough. It's age. It's time. It catches up with you. I feel like, it has caught up with Travis Kelce. And that's, I will make your point that, I in a backward way, they have to have Travis Kelce. They have to have Travis Kelce turn it on. If not, all these things we talked about in this segment, it's not happening. The Chiefs are not winning the Super Bowl with Noah Gray, with DeAndre Hopkins kind of coming and going, with Patrick Mahomes getting sacked all the time and throwing bad interceptions. That is not a Super Bowl winning team. When you have Detroit, when you have Philly, when you have Buffalo, when you have Lamar Jackson, there's so much. It's a league of separation this year. It's not a league of parity. It's a league where you have 4 or 5 teams who are really good. Detroit might be great in the end. You've got to be in that conversation. Kansas City's barely in that conversation right now, even though they're 10-1.
We're saying all these really positive things about the people behind the scenes, and it's why I agree with you. It feels. As much as I've compared them to last year's Eagles, I always felt negative about last year's Eagles because of the coaching, and this team have Andy Reid, and that is the great separator for me, right? But at the same time, it's Thanksgiving week this week, Black Friday, short week against the Raiders, a team who have always played them. We have these weird games where they randomly went and won in Arrowhead 2 years ago and then drove their bus around the stadium in celebration.
You're going to have Max.
There's a little bit of me.
You're going to have Max. I'm writing a story at talkSPORT.com in my head right now. You're going to have Max Crosby versus Patrick Mahomes, Will. That's the best rivalry in the NFL. The Raiders are worthless. The Raiders are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They're tanking.
Aiden O'Connell's going to beat the Chiefs on Friday.
They don't have a quarterback. They need a number one. They need Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders. They need to hire Deion Sanders, bring in Tom Brady, clean house. All those things, I completely agree with you. I'm not sure the Raiders win that game. That's going to be an interesting game, and the Raiders always play up. You'll be on national TV. They always play up against the Chiefs. If the Chiefs lose that game and they fall to 10-2, that opens the door for Buffalo to become the number one seed in the AFC. Kansas City has to. Is it a must win? No, you can still get the number one seed. But from a team perspective, we're going to have a historic three-peat. We're going to be the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls. You need to beat the really, really bad Las Vegas Raiders on Black Friday.
Right, let's get into the extra point. And look, it is Black Friday this week, Thanksgiving this week. And I think the NFL does big event stuff better than anyone else.
Oh, better than anyone in the world.
I love Thanksgiving NFL. Even though we've been given 2 of the 3 games this year have become vaguely interesting. One of them is dreadful. But I will every year from 5 p.m. till 4 a.m. stay up, watch it, turkey. It's nothing to do with me this holiday. The only thing that I'm so involved in it.
The only thing that there's a lot of things I miss, but the only thing that I truly miss that you cannot in any way replicate over here because of 1776, Thanksgiving is not a very big deal in the United Kingdom. I miss the turkey and family, but part of it is just having the NFL on.
Brian, right? Me and you need to go to one of the bars in London.
It's just not the same.
Full Thanksgiving thing.
And this is why the NFL now is, they're doing 3 games on Thanksgiving and Black Friday because you sit around the house, just like a little bit like Boxing Day and Christmas and Premier League. It's just not the same. No offense to anyone in the UK, because it's always on. Because at 11 a.m., the game is on. You have the pregame. And second to the Super Bowl, it's the biggest day, the biggest calendar time on the schedule, Will, is Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving turkey in the NFL, I mean, they're like this, and I really do miss it.
But this is why I want to bring on to my extra point. So it's the news that came out last week. The NFL have been gunning for Christmas for a while.
Yeah.
The NBA have owned it. They put their biggest matchups on. They give you NBA Christmas. That's their holiday. This year, the NFL are giving us 2 absolutely huge games, 4 of the biggest teams in the AFC going head-to-head, Ravens, Texans, and we've got Chiefs, Steelers. What a game that is.
That is fantastic.
At 6 p.m. Christmas Day, it's perfect for British people that at 6 p.m., just as you're getting a little bit sick of your family, just as you're starting to feel that belly, you can just tuck in to some NFL action. Netflix are broadcasting it this year.
Yeah.
They have paid 75...
I heard Netflix has had some issues with streaming or whatever. Hopefully they get that figured out.
So they have paid $75 million per game to take this on. And then what they've done, they've gone and said, right, halftime of the late game in Houston, let's go get arguably the biggest pop star in the world. I'd say Beyonce and Taylor Swift are both right there. Let's go get Beyonce.
Taylor Swift, Beyonce.
I don't know. Like, people have, Taylor Swift's had the tour recently.
Okay,
Beyonce
I'll get the
Beehive,
the Beehive after me.
Mega star, and they have thrown money at her to turn up on Christmas Day in her hometown. And I'll tell you, the number of non-NFL fans I know who have a Netflix subscription because they're not going to get Game Pass, but they, on Christmas, are going to be tuning in because they want to watch Beyonce at halftime. And the NFL, this juggernaut, is just going, right. Kendrick Lamar drops a new album this week. It's the biggest talking point in all of culture. He's doing the halftime show this year. It just astonishes me how time and time again the NFL goes, you think that anyone else is going to have a piece of this pie? No. It's all ours. And I love it. I cannot wait for Christmas Day.
It's genius. No, and like breaking news to the NBA and Adam Silver. Number one, David Stern would be absolutely embarrassed because the NBA, I used to cover the NBA, love the NBA. The NBA spent decades building that, taking over Christmas Day. It used to be such a huge deal where you would, from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m., have 5 NBA games. NBA doesn't matter anymore. Nobody cares about the NBA on Christmas Day because the big, mighty steamroller NFL decided to come in and kick you out of the tent, and they've completely taken over. Absolutely genius move by the NFL, doing it on Netflix. Hopefully they can get their streaming buffering issues right. But yeah, to have Kendrick Lamar doing the Super Bowl, might not be the world's biggest Kendrick Lamar fan, but he's very big. He's bigger than I am. He's bigger than you are. He's going to be, it's a huge deal. And that, the Beyonce thing is very, very smart because that's not just like you're trying to, get a pop star and get different eyeballs. She has true Houston roots, a Houston connection. I spent 12 years working and living in Houston and absolutely loved it. She's huge there. She's huge across the world. That is such a win-win for the NFL. Makes me think like, who's doing the halftime show at a premiere? Oh yeah, they can't even, they don't even do anything like that. That shows you the NFL, again, is the king of the world when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to packaging it all together. So they own Thanksgiving, second biggest holiday in America. They own Christmas, the first biggest holiday in America. You're gonna have Beyonce, you're gonna have games that you have to, have Netflix. It's a brilliant, brilliant move, and it's why they're expanding internationally. And it's why they continue to just rake in the billions in terms of profit. There's nothing bigger and more powerful in a sports league in the world than the NFL.
I do have a message, however, for Roger Goodell, for Jay-Z, for all those people who are involved in the booking of the halftime show, right? I've been lucky enough through my job to go to 9 of the last 10 Super Bowls, only missing the COVID year, right? I will tell you, hands down, the best halftime shows are when you reflect the culture of the city you're in. When they did the all-Latin Super Bowl halftime show in Miami and had J-Lo and Shakira, sensational. When in LA and they bring out Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Kendrick Lamar and these Compton legends in Inglewood just down the road, sensational. Why on earth was Beyonce doing the halftime show in New Orleans when they already had a Houston Super Bowl booked? Why on earth is Bruce Springsteen doing a Super Bowl the other side of the country when we've got one booked in New Jersey in a couple of years? I really want them to start nailing down into, right, we are bought into this city, we are making it all about these huge occasions, and we're going to have a Super Bowl halftime show that reflects that, because that is the best for me. It is just when you get that real feeling, yeah, okay, if it's a megastar, if it's a Lady Gaga, then you don't care either way. But just reflect the culture.
Wait,
of the place
you don't care about Lady Gaga? What?
She was brilliant, by the way. That Houston Super Bowl with Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga's fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Fantastic. I am not taking a shot at Lady Gaga.
Like Stop just pissing off all of the big fan bases of these pop queens because they're going to come for you, sir. I promise you. Best Super Bowl halftime show?
Best Super Bowl halftime show, Prince.
Yeah, it's Prince, right?
Prince. I'm sorry, they're not. They're overrated. I completely disagree with you. They're not that great anymore. They're not sensational. I care much more about the game than the halftime show. But speaking of Houston, there's someone that I want to get into, which is the Houston Texans, a team that we would come on here every week and talk about Super Bowl contenders. And this was starting to feel like the year started the season. They kept beating teams. They had injury issues, They have issues at wide receiver, some blocking problems, on and on and on. But it felt like CJ Stroud, they had their quarterback. Deshaun Watson turned into an absolute disaster for two franchises and for the NFL. And CJ Stroud was going to be your quarterback. And this year, I've just been reminded, and I feel like NFL fans, Texans, it's not that easy, right? It rarely works out that way. That's why Patrick Mahomes is so special. He's that 1 in a million type of guy to where he sat his first year, watched and learned from Alex Smith, took over a very good team and turned it into a dynasty. I mean, he replaced Tom Brady. Texans are struggling right now. The Texans do not at all look like a contender. They're not in talkSPORT's top 10 Super Bowl contenders. CJ Stroud is throwing bad picks. He's taking sacks.
How much are you pressing the panic button specific? Because you've talked about all those structural issues there. How much are you pressing the panic button on him and his performance?
No panic. There's no panic button here. I'm not. There's nothing to press. I'm not pressing the panic button on CJ Stroud. I am reminded though how difficult it is. And you don't just come in when you have question marks, win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and the next year take your team to the Super Bowl. He does not look we always mention confidence. He doesn't look very confident. When you're playing against the Tennessee Titans in the game, you want to talk about Kansas City and Carolina, and the Texans should be steamrolling the Tennessee Titans and Will Levis. The Titans were the better game. You're playing in Houston, and how does it end with CJ Stroud kind of scampering out of the end zone?
Pulling a full Dan Orlovsky.
Looking like Dan Orlovsky.
Yeah.
It cannot happen.
I feel so bad for Dan Orlovsky. He was trending all over social media again on Sunday.
Every time it happens. Yeah. But no, he's lost it a little right now. Now, part of it is injuries, and you're missing key players, but the great quarterbacks find a way to make that work. Patrick Mahomes is missing a ton. He's still 10-1 with the Chiefs. The Texans are becoming a total disappointment this year, and they're at a critical part in their season. And this is where CJ Stroud has to take the mantle and lift this team up. And right now, it's not happening.
Undoubtedly a disappointment, right? 2-4 over the last 6 games, losing to the Titans, embarrassing. I agree with all of that. I did see a lot of people starting to turn a little on CJ Stroud and his performances this weekend. And you're right, a couple of really bad picks in this game. But the team building there has been so dreadful. The offensive line, we're talking David.
I don't know that the team building has been dreadful there.
But seriously, the tackles being out is a problem. But the interior of that line is the worst in the NFL.
The offensive line has been an issue all season. I agree with that.
And he is now at the point where he is seeing ghosts, where he is throwing bad throws when there isn't pressure already there because he's expecting it to come his way. And yet they've had injuries at wide receiver as well. But there are guys who are available on the market who you could have gone and got and brought in.
Yeah, they're trying not to mortgage, the future for the present.
But there is only one Lombardi trophy. There is only one team.
They weren't winning. I mean, it's a long-term play there. And so they're not going to go all in when they know at the mid-season they already have issues. They weren't winning the Super Bowl at that point in the season. It made no sense for them to go all in. That actually would be the anti-version of building a team. I actually think Nick Caserio's done a fantastic job there as GM. He inherited a total dumpster fire. They found their way to the Deshaun Watson mess. They have really good talent at wide receiver. They have injury issues there. Joe Mixon was actually team building. Joe Mixon was a fantastic pickup for them.
This is what I wanted to get to, right?
Good defense with Will Anderson and Jalen. They've had a lot of injuries on that team. And for me, you're starting to see CJ Stroud try to do too much, overcompensate, and he's lost his confidence. And my point is, I'm just reminded it's not that easy in the NFL.
Team building isn't just talent on the field. And this is where my concern really comes in with Houston, is the self-scouting is such a problem. The run game this year hasn't been good. Joe Mixon has been good. They've relied on Mixon to be sensational, and he has been in fits and starts. but Bobby Slowick is calling a bad game week in, week out.
Fans want him gone.
They are doing absolutely nothing to protect and help CJ Stroud. You can have a bad offensive line and a talented quarterback. Heck, they did it in New England for years and years and years, where they didn't invest anything on the interior of the line, but they got the ball out quickly. Yeah. They set up the offense.
No, you're right about that.
And I'm really concerned that for DeMeco Ryans, the worm is turning a little bit. They're not dealing internally with the issues they clearly had. We all saw that Slowick wasn't the answer last year, but they went, no, we didn't have a running back. Now we've got a running back, it'll be fine. All of the same problems. I think Houston need to make some internal changes in order to make sure they maximize the talent.
I 100% agree with that. If they do not finish like they need to this year, and they should still win the AFC South, but it's getting a little closer than it ever should have. The easiest move for DeMeco Ryans to make is that, see ya, Slowick, we're getting a new offensive coordinator.
Right. Brian, another week, sensational stuff from you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. To our listeners who are on Spotify and listening to the podcast, please keep liking and subscribing and giving us reviews. The viewers on YouTube, if you've enjoyed it, take over the comments, get involved. Most importantly, subscribe and check out all the excellent content we're putting out throughout the week. Brilliant player interviews, exclusives. We're going to be doing more and more opinion stuff as well. And we'll be back next week with more NFL Rundown.